Hello and welcome, 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 welcome. Well, I guess you heard about the botched execution of Tony Carruthers, and so that's what we're going to be talking about today. So, what I'm going to do first, I'm going to read a little bit of back history, and then I'm going to bring you up to speed as I go along. So, Tony Carruthers, he is a Tennessee death row inmate convicted of the 1994 kidnappings and murders of three people in Memphis whose execution was recently halted after a failed and lethal injection attempt. Tony Carruthers, 57, was convicted of the 1994 murders of Marcellus Anderson, his mother Dolores Anderson, and Frederick Tucker in Memphis, Tennessee. So prosecutors alleged that Carruthers and an accomplice lured the victims to a cemetery where two were shot, one strangled, and then all three were buried alive, resulting in suffocation. Can you imagine being buried alive? Wow. Okay, so the case has been highly controversial, with Carruthers maintaining his innocence for decades, raising concerns about the fairness of his trial. Now, I really just now learning about this trial because of the botched execution. Okay, so, and I believe they said before they started the execution, what they were trying to do were to get a stay for the execution because they said they have evidence that may prove different or may make a difference in the case. But that didn't go through, so they did try to go ahead and execute him. But of course, it did come. It didn't go through. It was a box execution. So I want to go over here, and I want to read a little bit more before we go and watch a video update about it. So over here, I'm going to read the planned execution of Tennessee death row inmate Tony Carruthers was abruptly halted Thursday after officials were unable to complete the lethal injection, marking a dramatic last-minute reprieve in the case that has stirred controversy for decades. And I believe he was on death row for like 30 years. Okay, so Carruthers, 57, he was set to be executed at Riverbend Maximum Security Institution in Nashville. When the execution team, they struggled for more than an hour. More than an hour. Can you imagine that? To establish an IV access required to administer the lethal drugs. Medical personnel were able to place a primary IV line, but could not find a suitable vein for the mandatory backup line, according to the Tennessee Department of Correction. Officials also attempted to insert a central line, an alternative method used when peripheral veins cannot be accessed, but that effort failed as well. With no way to proceed under the state's execution protocol, the procedure was ultimately called off. Tennessee Governor Bill Lee has given Carruthers a 1-year reprieve from the ordeal. That is just diabolical. I can imagine what he was feeling or what was going through his mind when they was trying to find a vein that they can use. That is just terrible. I don't even have no words. So I want to go over here now. I want to pull up this video about him, and if I can get it up, and this is by Democracy Now. So we're going to go over there and we're going to watch and listen to this video. I did not watch the video, so I don't really know what's in it, but I know that they are talking about Tony Carruthers and how he survived the box execution. So let's go ahead and get into the video.
democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. We end today's show in Tennessee, where the execution of Tony Carruthers was called off after prison officials struggled to find a vein to administer lethal injection drugs. Last week, the Republican Governor Bill Lee issued a one-year reprieve to Carruthers over the botched execution, which came despite Carruthers' claims of innocence and demands for a new trial. We're joined now by Stephen Hale, criminal justice reporter at the Nashville Banner, author of the book Death Row Welcomes You, Visiting Hours in the Shadow of the Execution Chamber. Stephen, thanks so much for being with us. You were a media witness for this botched execution. If you can tell us what happened and tell us the story of Tony Carruthers.
That's right. Thanks for having me, Amy. So last week, I was one of several of the media witnesses for this planned execution. One of the frustrating things is I can't tell you what we saw because we didn't end up seeing anything. In Tennessee, as of right now, the process where the person who's being executed is prepared for the execution, in this case where the IV lines are placed for a lethal injection, happens behind a curtain. And so me and the other media witnesses were literally in the dark, in a dark viewing room with the curtain that looks into the execution chamber drawn. And that curtain would have opened if they had successfully placed these IV lines in Mr. Carruthers, but that never happened. So what we ended up doing was sitting in the dark for more than an hour and
yeah, that's what I was getting ready to say. Remember, they're sitting there for over an hour while they're in the room trying to locate a vein so they can, start the IV for the lethal drugs. I mean, over an hour. I think that's a long time to be trying to locate a vein. Just think when you're going to the doctor's office yourself and they're searching you to draw blood. And now it doesn't take, if you haven't experienced phlebotomists, it doesn't take them an hour. It takes like less than not even 2 minutes. It doesn't take that long. But imagine you sitting in that chair for over an hour while the phlebotomist is trying to locate a vein to draw blood. That is exceptional. That's absolutely too long.
Trying to listen to what was happening in the execution chamber, not all of which we understood at the time. A lot of it we found out later. But that turned out to be the sound of them struggling to place the IV lines in Mr. Carruthers. We were told later by his attorney that they tried to, after getting a primary line in in one of his arms, they tried the other arm, they tried a hand, his feet, ultimately tried his jugular vein in his neck, and before trying place a central line in his chest. And when that was unsuccessful, after more than an hour, they called off the execution. So it was quite an ordeal, and obviously his attorney later would tell us that he was in agony, and we could hear him groaning in pain from the viewing room. But like I said, we didn't end up ever seeing him or what was going on.
Go to Carruthers' attorney, Maria Deliberato of the ACLU.
IV line in his shoulder was filled with blood, like backfilled towards his chest area.
And then I'm thinking when they said that he was groaning in pain, they probably was jabbing the needles in there because at that point they knew the man was scheduled to be executed. So I don't think any kind of tender care was taken when they tried to insert the needle into his body. They probably just was jabbing it in there, and then the longer that it proceeded and went on, probably the more impatient they got. So I can just imagine the non-care that they was exhibiting when they was inserting, trying to find a vein, because and I think they was like using some large needles, and those needles, they are painful.
And he said that his chest really hurt. This was a tortured, botched execution. I mean, there's no question about it. I mean, I guess it's not an execution because thankfully, by the grace of God, he's still alive. But they tortured him trying to find a vein.
Right, that's what I just said. I couldn't picture them doing it like a mad scientist trying to locate a vein. Is absolutely, and like she said, it is by the grace of God, because they went to all those places and they could not locate and access a suitable vein. So that, to me, that's a miracle, and it is by the grace of God. And maybe this will be give him time, because he got a year reprieve, and I think perhaps it would give him time to present their case and present some new evidence, because they said that they have 2 fingerprints that have not been tested, but they believe it does not belong to Tony Carruthers.
So grateful that we are going to have a chance to prove what we've been saying and what Tony has been saying for 30 years, that he didn't commit this crime. I know that he believes that this happened, that this botched attempt to take his life happened for a reason, and it will strengthen his resolve to fight even more.
And Steve, could you talk about the case that was originally filed by the ACLU seeking DNA testing about crucial physical evidence? Why hasn't this DNA testing happened in over 30 years?
That's a good question.
Yeah, well, that's a good question, but you're right. The ACLU filed earlier this year asking for crime scene evidence to be tested, both for DNA analysis and fingerprint analysis. Mr. Carruthers was convicted along with a co-defendant in 1996 for a triple murder in Shelby County, Memphis, here in Tennessee. And he's always maintained his innocence, but his case has, I was saying to someone the other day, is pretty much every issue that you see come up in death penalty cases is present in this case in one way or another. Mr. Carruthers has maintained his innocence. His attorneys have long said that he's profoundly mentally ill. He was forced to represent himself at his trial. 6 defense attorneys were appointed to be his attorney and then ended up leaving the case, and the judge eventually refused to appoint a 7th. And so he represented himself at this capital murder trial. And so his representation, we often see in capital cases that people later will talk about how they had poor representation. He basically had none. He represented himself. He did not have an attorney. And so he's always maintained that he...
So I was wondering if he was mentally ill back then, where he just really, it was evident. And I don't know at what point in his life did he start exhibiting some mental illness.
Was innocent, and there was no physical evidence in this case brought by prosecutors. What there was the testimony of a man who later turned out to be a paid informant and who later recanted his testimony. And so there's basically just questionable circumstantial evidence against Mr. Carruthers. And so all these years later, his attorneys at the ACLU have been pushing for that crime scene evidence to be tested. They said that this evidence, if it were tested, it could potentially exonerate him. We don't know, because the courts so far had blocked those efforts, and the governor, right before this failed execution, had announced that he was not going to intervene to hold off the execution so that testing could take place. So I can't answer really for you why it hasn't been, but now that Mr. Carruthers has a 1-year reprieve, I imagine his attorneys will be trying to get that done in whatever way they can.
And what does this case raise about mental illness issues in relation to death row prisoners as well?
Yeah, so Mr. Carruthers...
I thought they was that, I don't know the law around this, but I heard that they're not permitted, or shouldn't be permitted, or are not permitted to execute people that are mentally ill.
According to his attorneys in court filings for years now, they say that he has had delusions about his case, basically that he didn't even believe he was going to be executed, that he thought he would be released anytime. And because he was, as I said, convinced of his innocence, and had started to believe that his attorneys and other people involved in his case were actually plotting against him. And Sadly, this is not unusual. Of all the death penalty cases I've covered and all the ones that I have read about, some of ones I've watched you all cover on Democracy Now!, mental illness is often a factor in one way or another. And whether that's affecting a person's ability to kind of help their attorneys represent them at trial, whether it's a factor in the crime that they committed if they were indeed guilty, or in their understanding of the case later. And so his attorneys did go to court and argue that he was not mentally competent to be executed, that he was too mentally ill to be constitutionally executed. The courts rejected that argument. But this is a situation in one form or another that we see in lots of death penalty cases around the country and certainly in Tennessee.
Stephen Hale, as we wrap up, you have been covering this case and other death penalty cases. You're not only a criminal justice reporter at the Nashville Banner, you wrote Death Row Welcomes You. You decided not to be a witness to these executions after being a witness to them a number of times. Why did you decide to witness Carruthers' execution that didn't actually happen?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I did, as you said, I witnessed 3 executions a few years back in 2018 and 2019. And it's not a pleasant assignment. And my other colleagues and reporters who have done so as well, I think, would agree. And so I was pretty well burnt out on that and exhausted and not in a good place to do it again. I decided to do it again now, years later, because a colleague of mine at the Banner has done a couple of these. My editor, Steve Cavendish, has witnessed a couple that have happened recently. Other reporters that I work with here in Tennessee have been witnessing them. And I think it's vitally important that if the state is going to execute its citizens, that someone who can, I guess you'd say represent the citizens, can be there in the room to watch them do it and report what happens. And so I did think it was important that I volunteer to do it again. I certainly don't want to go to everyone, and I'm not eager to watch any of them, but I do think it's really important that people be able to see clearly, or as clearly as we can tell them, what an execution looks like. And, that's part of a lawsuit that we at the Banner and some other media outlets here in Tennessee are part of, is to expand the transparency of this process so that media witnesses could see the IV lines being placed, could see more of this process, because I think if people are going to live in a state that has a death penalty, they deserve to see as much of it as is possible so that they can judge it for what it is.
Stephen Hale, we thank you so much for being with us. We'll link to your articles in the Nashville Banner. Author of Death Row Welcomes You, Visiting Hours in the Shadow of the Execution Chamber. Speaking to us from Nashville, Tennessee. That does it for our show. On Wednesday night, I'll be at the IFC Center.
Okay, so let's go and see what some of the comments are saying. One commenter wrote, said, imagine a system condemning you to death being too incompetent to kill you. And then another one said, glad there were witnesses. Thank God there's somebody trying to help shed light on the death penalty in Tennessee. Thank you, Steve. And then another person wrote, hell to the gnaw. If you couldn't get it the first time, give him life. That's something to consider. That's definitely something to consider. And he's already been in there for over 3 decades. So why not give him life? Why just take his life? Okay, you can't just torture people. If that's the case, he should be on the gurney too. And then another person wrote, I hope Tony Carruthers get a new trial. And then I'm going to read 2 more. All executions should be supported by DNA. This sounds like he's being framed, like it's a quiet conversation going on in the background. Guy who was so-called with him is free. Yeah, he did go free. The paid informant took his statement back. No evidence. And don't forget, they have evidence that they haven't even examined. Again, I hear they have fingerprints that they didn't even analyze yet. So refusing to test the DNA, but staying firm on getting rid of him. It's looking like they know this man is innocent, but want to silence the situation by killing him. Okay, so that I just finished my video about the botched execution of Tony Carruthers, and then I came across another video. Now I haven't watched this. I am like I'm excited to watch this. I don't even have my right screen on. All right, so let's get into this. Now there's a lawsuit, so they have a lawsuit that's going on, and in the lawsuit it says new lawsuit alleges doctor failed execution. He was not qualified. Let's watch this video, and then let's watch this video.
An attempted execution is fueling the call for Tennessee to pause further lethal injections.
And today, federal defense attorneys are asking Governor Bill Lee to stop executions until the litigation ends. Peyton Kennedy joins us this morning with details. Peyton?
Well, this is the second time in just over 4 years that Tennessee's lethal injection process is under scrutiny after an execution goes wrong. Tony Carruthers was set to be executed last week. He was convicted of a 1994 triple murder in Memphis. Carruthers' attorney tells us that medical personnel attempted to stick a backup IV into his arms, hands, feet, and jugular area. The attorney says, though, they failed to find a vein, and then that execution was called off. Today, a federal public defender and an ACLU attorney who witnessed that execution attempt are leading a press conference. They are asking Governor Bill Lee to pause further executions, quote, to ensure that the state is following its own rules and to implement appropriate oversight, end quote. The attorneys are specifically referencing litigation concerning the current execution protocol that is currently pending in Davidson County Court. The litigation claims that Tennessee's new protocol, which was adopted in 2025, has significant omissions, including a lack of provisions for training, qualifications, and oversight of those who were administering that lethal injection. News 2's Tori Gessner was set to witness the execution. Here is her testimony she gave after that attempt.
This is the fourth execution I've covered and the third I was set to witness, and definitely the most unusual, mainly because it didn't happen and there was a lot of waiting. Even before we got into the witness chamber, we were taken into another room, kind of waiting, and then we're told there may have been some movement in the courts, and so to kind of hold on, so that was already kind of in our heads there. Eventually went to the chamber, and we're sitting there. Normally, in my past two experiences, we've sat there for like 10, 15 minutes tops. We were there for an hour, close to an hour and a half.
Governor Bill Lee granted Tony Carruthers a 1-year reprieve, and right now Tennessee's next execution is scheduled for August 13th. Nicole.
I don't think they need to be doing any more execution. It says that doctor, he didn't draw a line since 2013. So, oh wow. Let me see if I can find I am trying to find a written news story about this case, because this is the first time I'm hearing it, and now they have a lawsuit that's going on about it now. And so you know what? See, everything happens for a reason. Everything happens for a reason. So here, I found something over here. So let's go over here. It says doctor qualifications in Tony Carruthers' execution attempt. The doctor who attempted to place a central line for Tony Carruthers' lethal injection on May 21st, 2026 was Dr. Mark Walton Fowler. Okay, make sure you don't let him go stick you. Don't even go to him. He might be a quack. I wonder if he even got his credentials, or are they up to par? Mark Fowler of Union, Tennessee. But the Tennessee Department of Health lists him with an active, okay, so it's active. He does have a medical license that is active. His qualifications for the procedure have been questioned. Federal public defender Amy Harwell, representing Carruthers, stated that Dr. Fowler is not qualified to perform the task, noting that most medical professionals avoid lethal injections due to ethical obligations to do no harm. She also criticized the state for relying on individuals with inadequate training and minimal conscience. So remember, it says that he haven't drawn a line since 2013. So further allegations came from a federal court filing in deposition, where it was claimed that Dr. Fowler had not placed a central IV line in a patient in over 13 years and had no current hospital privileges, meaning no facility has authorized him to perform such procedures. In his deposition, he admitted placing a dozen or more central lines in his career, including one ending with a guide wire in a carotid vein. The AMA Code for Ethics explicitly, prohibits physicians from participating in legal authorized executions, including by starting IV lines for lethal injection. Dr. Fowler holds an active medical license. His lack of recent central line experience, absence of current hospital privileges. He don't have no hospital privileges. So I wonder if he have a private practice then. And ethical objections from legal counsels have raised serious questions about his qualifications for the procedures. Okay, and so here, what is this? Is this a news? There's a news source here. I don't know. Okay, so it looks like they're just having holding a press conference there with that, and this is more information, which I am not going to read. Okay, so but yeah, that's amazing. All right, so like I said, everything does happen for a reason. So it is a blessing. It is a divine intervention that interrupted the execution of Tony, but it also led to the halting of future executions in Tennessee. So we just have to follow this case and just follow this case and see where it goes. But the governor did give Tony a 1-year reprieve from the execution because of the botched execution. So I'm thinking, why don't they just either like give him a new trial and test the DNA, go take the things that they have and haven't tested, run a test for the DNA and see if it lead to another person who was involved. Then maybe Tony wasn't as involved as they say that he was. So so we'll just have to go ahead and keep following the case. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and end the video, and I'll see you in my next clip or in my next video. Okay, y'all be blessed. I'm out.